Ultimate Spider-Man has been going on for 2 years now, and a lot of people love this book, including me. But as I've been reading on and catching up with the series, something just didn't feel right to me. At first, I couldn't put my finger on what it was, whether it was the story, the world, or the tone, and then I figured it out. It was this guy, Richard Parker. Ultimate Spider-Man is a very interesting and unique take on the Marvel Universe. One thing that I really love about this book is that it manages to feel all-encompassing. Every issue during Ultimate Spider-Man feels like the stakes of the Ultimate Universe are always bearing down upon it. It always feels like the bigger players are at large, and that Peter, MJ, Richard, and May are just trying to navigate their way through this really complex universe. It almost has sort of an espionage sort of feel to the series, where Peter and Harry are constant underdogs to a large, overseeing, all-knowing, oppressive government. And as I would come to realize, despite loving the interconnectedness of the universe, this would actually end up being a major problem for me. The more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that this book tends to focus way more on the Maker stuff and everything going on in the Ultimates, and having that hang over Ultimate Spider-Man rather than focusing on the characters themselves. And I feel like this issue I have is perfectly summed up by one character, and that is Richard Parker. Richard in this story has a fascinating concept on paper. Him trying to be Spider-Man, or Spider-Boy, or whatever you want to call him, while Peter is still acting as the main Spider-Man and his father, is a really interesting concept. I think this is an idea that a lot of Spidey fans really like, especially if you've been reading the 616 comics. You know that Peter as a character does not progress nearly as much as we want him to, so this kind of concept is really interesting to a lot of people. If you aren't aware, essentially the reason why Richard is Spider-Man is because the pyrotech suit that Peter got given by Tony Stark during the start of the series had an AI assistant built into it by Otto Octavius. The AI assistant is a replica of Peter himself, and when Peter and Harry got kidnapped and tortured by Kraven the Hunter, the pyrotech suit pretended to be Peter, and since then has now been taken on by Richard Parker. This is a really cool idea. Peter goes missing, Richard Parker becomes Spider-Man. How is Peter going to react when he returns and find out his son is Spider-Man? Well, Richard just keeps the suit and Peter's cool with it. Okay? During the issue before, Harry Osborn is shot in the head by Kraven, and as far as Peter is concerned at this point in time, Harry Osborn is now dead. So when he returns to New York to see Richard acting as Spider-Man, he's fine with it. There are mentions here and there that he's slightly concerned, and there is actually a whole dialogue exchange and a few panels trying to justify this reason. Peter also tells MJ that Richard is better off with the suit than without it, but I just don't buy it. Harry Osborn had Stark Tech grade armor. He was literally the Green Goblin, and it still got taken away from him, and he still died. And Peter isn't concerned for 1 second that this could happen to his own son. You'd expect Peter Parker in this situation to go, absolutely not. Even if you're safer with the suit, you are not getting involved in any of this superhero business. I'm taking the suit off you right this second. There is absolutely no way in hell that Peter would be okay with Richard even keeping the suit, let alone fighting alongside him as Spider-Man. Especially when we're led to believe that everything Peter does in this book is for his family. The whole reason he fights, the whole reason he wants to take down the Kingpin and the Maker is because if he doesn't, his family might die. Letting Richard onto the front line, in my opinion, is completely out of character for Peter Parker. And, you know, even if he has the pyrotech suit, it's kind of like, what the hell? That leads me on to the bigger issue, because it isn't just Peter being okay with Richard having the suit, it's how MJ is consistently always okay with it. There was one time where MJ did actually crash out when Richard went off to do Spider-Man stuff behind their backs, and MJ really had a go at him, and I thought, well, this is it now. This is the family drama we've been waiting for. However, after this, Richard is still using the suit. Richard is still Spider-Man. It's also how, despite Peter and Richard literally risking their lives every day, May, the youngest of the family, never shows any signs of early childhood trauma or even being affected by any of this. And even if she is, it's never focused on. It's how, despite Harry's death being a potential motivator for Peter going forward in the series, he ends up returning anyway. There's one key underlying problem with every decision that I have just mentioned. There is no drama in this series. I love this book, I really do, but sometimes it feels like they are constantly trying to set things up with no payoff. And in contrast to that, it always feels like the bigger universe, the ultimate universe, is way more important than any of these characters to begin with. And this is just how I feel. I love the concepts of this book rather than the story itself. I love the idea of Peter having kids and a wife, but what does Hickman do with that? Nothing interesting, really. I also absolutely love the idea that they've teased that the fact that the pyrotech suit could genuinely become Venom. It had these creepy and really unsettling undertones when it spoke to Peter in the earlier issues. But ever since Richard got the suit, that kind of feels like that story was put to the sidelines. And yes, Richard technically has become Venom in the very literal and monstrous sense, but not in the traditional way, not the way that Hickman was originally teasing. The way the pyrotech suit was acting originally got us to think, oh my god, this is gonna be the way they're gonna do the symbiote story. The pyrotech suit is gonna be evil and is gonna have different moral and ethical values to that of Peter Parker. But the more we got to learn about the pyrotech suit, the more the creepy undertones went away, and that story of him potentially becoming an evil version of Spider-Man sort of was pushed to the sidelines. It almost feels like if they do end up going down the path of Richard somehow becoming an evil Spider-Man in the last 2 issues, it will kind of feel a little bit out of nowhere and a little bit forced, as the build-up and setup for this payoff has genuinely been halted. And Richard, for the past 5 issues, has shown no intent of becoming an evil Spider-Man. Sometimes it really feels like this book is more prioritized on delivering the story of the Ultimate Universe rather than Ultimate Spider-Man. Like Peter and his family are just an afterthought, like their stories don't really matter because there are bigger stakes at hand. And yes, there are, because the Maker story and the Ultimate Incursion story is really what's going on here on a larger scale. However, my point is that one of the biggest draw-ins for Spider-Man fans like myself, and probably so many of you as well, is the idea that Peter had a wife and kids. He was married to MJ, he had Richard and May, and we got to see an older Spider-Man, which we haven't been able to see since One More Day. We get to see this version of Spider-Man that we've been longing for such a long time. However, there hasn't really been much focus on what that means for the characters. And so far, at least in my opinion, I don't think much has been done in trying to prioritize some of that character drama and what it means for Peter as Spider-Man. Rather, MJ and the kids are supportive. Richard is now Spider-Man, and May's character feels more of an afterthought than anything else. And I really do think the characters suffer from this, because during the first half of this series back in 2024, I was all for this. I thought, yeah, MJ's character is great. We haven't seen MJ like this in a very long time, and this is absolutely awesome. But the less time that's gone on, I feel like MJ's just become less of an interesting character. And I still can't get over the fact that Peter is largely okay with his son being Spider-Man. It just doesn't make much sense to me, and I feel like the whole reason why we got drawn into this book is sort of being pushed to the sidelines for the story of the Maker. Yeah, I still love this book. I love the ideas, the artwork is amazing, the scale is brilliant as well, but like I said, I just think a lot of the focus is taken away from Peter and the character drama that comes with some of these stories. I feel like this book is just way too afraid of conflict to divide our main characters. And without conflict, there's no drama. And without drama, I don't think we have a good Spider-Man story. At least not a great one. I wish there was still time for Hickman to take a step back and really tackle what would make this book really special. But unfortunately, we're 2 issues from the end, and it's very likely that they're going to wrap up this story and it will be gone forever. Make sure to subscribe for more Spider-Man content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and peace.